Just a first question, tell us how the Monaco experience has been so far. Ça se passe comment cette expérience, ce festival à Monte Carlo? Matt?
It's been beautiful, fast and furious, and very ingratiating, and we're happy to be here. We're happy to be included. We just got to meet the royal family, so we're very glad to be here.
Voilà, on vient de rencontrer la famille royale, donc on est très heureux d'être ici. Kelsey?
Yeah, the same. I've had a lovely time here. I've visited a couple of times in the past, but I've never really spent much time in Monaco, and it's lovely, of course.
Voilà, j'ai déjà pu venir plusieurs fois à Monaco, mais j'ai pas pu passer trop de temps et j'ai envie de revenir justement. And so let's talk about The Last Tycoon. What drew each of you to this project? Pourquoi vous avez eu envie de faire The Last Tycoon, Chris?
Well, I obviously got involved pretty early before these guys did.
Donc moi, je l'ai fait tout au début, bien sûr.
Billy Ray and I worked on this together. It was a project that was brought to me, so I didn't come to it. It came to me.
Voilà, c'est pas moi qui ai créé le projet, on me l'a amené avec Billy Ray, qui est le réalisateur.
But it touched on a lot of different themes that really fascinated me, and so I jumped on it immediately. First of all, I love Fitzgerald and the things that he writes about, the people and the conflicts. I also love the idea of doing a show about Hollywood, what it is about movies that fascinates us, and how we need movies, why we need them. All those things mattered to me a lot, so it just seemed like a great opportunity, and then we cast it, I think, really well.
Donc surtout ce qui m'a inspiré, il dit Chris, c'était le fait que j'adore F. Scott Fitzgerald et aussi j'adore ce monde de Hollywood et surtout de cette époque, et bien sûr on a trouvé une cast extraordinaire. Kelsey, how about for you? What was it about this world that fascinated you? Pourquoi envie d'entrer dans ce monde de The Last Tycoon?
I received an offer. I asked to read the script, and I thought it was a good script. So
Tout simplement, on m'a envoyé le scénario, je l'ai lu.
It's pretty simple. I just thought, the hell, it'll work.
Voilà, il dit, allez, pourquoi pas, je vais travailler dessus. Matt?
I had recently read a book called Day of the Locust by Nathaniel West, which takes place in a similar time period, similar world, has similar themes, and was weighing out, a lot of art versus commerce ideas in my head when Billy called me out of the blue and told me about this project, and we sat down together and he told me his plans for the series. I thought it had great legs, and when I heard about the creatives involved and met Chris, it just seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Donc en fait, à l'époque, quand on m'a proposé le scénario, je lisais un roman qui s'appelait Day of the Locust, qui parlait un peu des mêmes thèmes, en fait, c'est la même époque aussi, et surtout ces conflits entre l'art et le business, si vous voulez. Donc déjà, j'avais un peu la tête dans ces thèmes-là, et donc ça m'a parlé beaucoup, et puis après, quand je savais qu'il y avait l'autre cast aussi qui allait être là aussi, ça m'a bien inspiré.
When he said no-brainer, how do you say that en français?
I gotta plow through that one.
No-brainer, or is it, there was something in there?
Non, Kelsey me dit, comment vous dites no-brainer, qui veut dire quand quelque chose est très très facile? We just say très très facile.
It's very easy.
Yeah, very easy, exactly. Why do you think F. Scott Fitzgerald's work is so appealing, not just to an American audience, but to a global audience? Pourquoi les œuvres de F. Scott Fitzgerald peuvent parler autour du monde, pas seulement aux Américains?
That's a good question. For me, the great work of Fitzgerald touches on this question about who we are and how we change as we begin to pursue the things that we want most.
D'accord, donc Chris dit en fait ce qui l'inspire le plus chez Fitzgerald, c'est qui on est et comment on peut changer au fur et à mesure qu'on poursuit la chose qu'on veut le plus au monde.
So in the 1930s or 40s, they would have called that the American dream and the cost of the American dream. But it's universal, this question of the idea that we are all in pursuit of something, and in pursuit of that thing, we sometimes lose ourselves.
Il dit que dans les années 30, on aurait dû bien appeler ça le rêve américain, bien qu'il trouve que c'est quelque chose qui parle à tout le monde. Et c'est ça qui l'intéresse aussi, c'est cette idée de comment on poursuit ça sans se perdre, et si on se perd, qu'est-ce qu'il arrive?
Interesting.
Kelsey, were you a big F. Scott Fitzgerald?
No, I don't actually. I wasn't a big fan. I read, Great Gatsby when I was 14, I think it was on the reading list,
Voilà, Kelsey n'est pas une grande fan, il a lu Gatsby le Magnifique à 14 ans parce qu'on est obligé à
But
l'école.
I was just thinking about in terms of his global appeal. I mean, he lived in France for a while, did he not? And there was a kind of an expatriate, an expat kind of vibe about him as well. There was a whole community of guys in his music as well. And there was, yeah, exactly. And then there was also the post-World War I existence in France and in Germany and writers and music. It was the discovery of the sort of the chromatic scale and Aaron Copland, who became known as having the American sound, basically found the American sound studying in France. which is kind of fascinating. And the Age of Anxiety, which was coined by W.H. Auden, it was a time of celebration and also discovery. I mean, it's a really interesting thing. There's a whole generation of people that have been destroyed by World War I, especially in France. Mostly an entire generation of men died. And so the world was kind of looking for an identity that I suppose was happening at the same time that Fitzgerald was writing.
Donc Kelsey qui parlait un peu de cette notion de global, en fait, je vais faire synthétique, hein. Mais c'est ce qu'il dit Kelsey, c'est Elska Fitzgerald a vécu justement en France pendant une période. Il y avait beaucoup d'Américains qui sont partis entre les deux guerres pour aller vivre à l'étranger justement, et ça se voit souvent, si c'est dans la musique, avec Aaron Copland ou avec d'autres auteurs, qui avaient une certaine façon de regarder les États-Unis avec cette distance, cette façon d'être un expatrié. Donc il trouve que c'est ça aussi qui peut se retrouver dans les thèmes globaux qu'on retrouve dans la série. I synthesized.
That was impressive.
I synthesized. Something like that. Tell me about, Matt, for you and Kelsey, I mean, these guys haven't seen it yet, so they don't quite know. Explain what your relationship is and how you worked on creating the relationship when you were prepping. Je leur demande un peu sur la relation entre ces deux personnages que vous allez découvrir et comment ils ont fait pour travailler cette relation.
Well, it's somewhat father-son, it's somewhat mentor-apprentice. You know, and most of Fitzgerald's work, there's this idea of the reinvention of the self, and as Chris was discussing earlier, and really Pat Brady, his character, is who helped usher him from Milton Sternberg from the Bronx to Monroe Star, studio executive extraordinaire.
Wow.
It is a little bit more complex than that. They certainly have some underpinnings of other things. It gets a little incestuous as we go along, but
More than
yeah.
Hang on one second. Donc il dit c'est un peu père-fils, c'est un peu comme une senior et une junior, un peu comme une maître si vous voulez, un étudiant. En fait c'est le personnage de Kelsey, Pat Brady, qui trouve le personnage de Matt quand il habite dans le Bronx et qui le crade, qui le change un peu pour qu'il devienne un grand producteur hollywoodien. Et après ça devient un peu incestueux, mais ça vous allez voir peut-être un petit peu dans le premier épisode, donc il vous en dit pas plus. Kelsey, how about for you?
You know, you get on stage and you rehearse. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time. Maybe it's because I'm lazy. Maybe it's because I just know everything already.
Kelsey dit qu'il ne répète pas beaucoup, peut-être parce qu'il est feignant, peut-être parce qu'il est déjà au courant de tout ce qu'il faut savoir.
We met, and the vibration exists. You know, there's a sense of jealousy, of envy. My character loves him, but also it just riles him up so much that he is so good at what he does, and that's a great dynamic to have to play. It's just almost every time he looks at me, he thinks, why does he get it and I don't? And so I like that about Pat Brady, because Pat Brady gets almost everything else. He just doesn't get how to make a great movie. He knows how to make movies, how to finance them and get them made and get people motivated or scare people into being motivated. He's very good with that. He's a bit of a tough. But this thing that he inspires in people is a point of envy for my character.
I would also argue that the relationship is symbiotic.
Absolutely.
Because without Pat's practicality and bullishness at times, I don't think anything would get pushed through.
Neither of us probably would have made it.
Yeah.
Donc je rattrape vite fait, just one sec, je rattrape vite fait. Donc Matt, en fait, il disait, il trouve que c'est un peu il y a une symbiose entre leurs deux personnages, et en fait, il trouve que Robert Monroe a besoin en quelque sorte du personnage de Pat, justement qui le pousse un peu, parce que ce qu'il disait tout à l'heure Kelsey, c'est que son personnage Pat Brady est un peu jaloux en quelque sorte du personnage de Matt, parce que Matt, il joue quelqu'un qui arrive à tout faire, c'est vraiment un golden boy qui peut arriver à tout faire avec des bons films et tout, et Pat, il peut faire plein de choses en tant que producteur, mais il ne peut pas arriver au niveau de personnage de Matt, de Monroe Star. Et donc il dit qu'il aime bien jouer cette jalousie, cette envie, pour lui c'est quelque chose qui l'intéressait aussi beaucoup. You have all worked on so many different types of shows over the years. You guys have worked on so many different types of shows over the years. Talk to us a bit about those experiences and maybe what you learned from them, those shows that you use in this show. Je pose des questions, ils ont fait beaucoup de séries différentes depuis des années. Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont appris dans leurs autres séries, dans leurs autres personnages qui l'ont aidé dans cette série? Kelsey, okay.
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Choreographed.
Well, in some ways, although the shows I've worked on, and I'm sure Matt and Kelsey would say the same thing, that they're different, their plots are different, their tones are different. They're more similar than not. The things that I look for when I decide what show to do, apart from what's offered to me, and the things that I hope that I accomplish in the show are more or less the same all the way through. First of all, it's almost always about an audience's deep connection to characters, individual people. For me, that comes through themes first, the big ideas that I want to talk about. So, for example, Party of Five was really about the way in which people who are at a point in their lives when they ought to be thinking about themselves, how they end up having to take care of each other. So it's about that. In this show, for example, the really big questions that get asked end up being, as these guys both mentioned, they're about the ways in which these two men, for example, desperately need each other. And yet, in spite of that, they can't succeed fully with each other. So those sorts of things actually really draw me. And in the long run, as I've said often to them, is that it really depends on casting. You can write anything you want in the long run, and the better the writing is, the better off you are. But a show succeeds or fails because an audience, for some inexplicable reason, begins to develop some emotional connection to those people they see on screen. That's what matters. So the shows that I've done that have worked because people love the characters they see. And then they begin to, and then you can do anything you want. That's the great thing about it. You get to love.
Donc Chris, il lui dit en fait, des séries sur lesquelles il a travaillé, là où il y a un thème, si vous voulez, entre toutes ces séries, c'est qu'il y a vraiment une vraie relation qui se crée entre les personnes et leurs envies, et aussi entre les personnages et les téléspectateurs qui regardent ça. Donc il disait tout à l'heure, en parlant de La vie à 5, en fait, ce qui l'a fasciné dans cette histoire, c'était ces jeunes qui étaient au moment de leur vie où ils devaient vraiment commencer leur vie, et en fait, ils se retrouvent en train d'être obligés de s'occuper des plus petits des autres. Donc il aimait bien cette dynamique. Et pareil avec ces deux personnages-là, il dit le fait que ces deux hommes, ils ont besoin vraiment l'un de l'autre, mais à la fois ils se détestent, ils s'aiment. En fait, c'est vraiment cette relation un peu conflictuelle. C'est ça aussi. Et il dit que pour les téléspectateurs, en fait, dès qu'ils s'accrochent à un personnage, dès qu'ils tombent amoureux d'un personnage, c'est là où vraiment on peut aller jusqu'au bout avec l'histoire. Et c'est ça pour lui qui est vraiment très intéressant, de créer ce genre de personnages. Kelsey, how about for you? What did you learn maybe from your years being Dr. Frasier that you might tap into here, if anything?
Well, honestly,
qu'est-ce que vous avez appris en tant que Frasier, peut-être dont vous vous servez aujourd'hui?
The more you learn, the less you know.
Plus qu'on apprend, moins on sait.
I believe that the best thing we can do is bring as much as we know and try to come uncovered and then slip and slide and hopefully find out what you want to say. Eventually you develop a shorthand, which is starting to happen with us and between us, where you trust each other so you know that you can slip and slide a lot and you'll still be safe. You can land, you have a good landing no matter what you try to do. And that's, I think, when the work starts to become great, is when you realize that you're safe and you can try anything. And we have gotten there, we got there pretty quickly. Those first couple of shows were always like, oh, what am I gonna do? But the writing's good, characters are well drawn, and these are, several of the actors in our cast are accomplished and good at what they do. And as long as you've got that, then, magic is really just a heartbeat away at any moment. You don't know where it's going to come from. All of a sudden, there you are standing there going, wow, that just felt real. And I think that's the test for me, when I realize that I'm actually crying. At the same time, my character is having a moment, and I'm sneaking out through there a little bit. Kelsey gets to take a ride along with the character. It's really fun.
Donc Kelsey lui dit, en fait, pour lui, c'est beaucoup autour du confort, quand vous avez un confort sur le tournage. Par exemple, il disait dans les 2-3 premiers épisodes, on a besoin d'un peu improviser, on ne sait pas trop ce qu'on fait, un peu à droite et à gauche comme ça. Et puis en fin de compte, au fur et à mesure, on trouve notre rythme. Et il dit que sur The Last Tycoon, ils ont trouvé leur rythme assez vite. Et là, tu peux vraiment regarder tes partenaires, tu peux dire, waouh, il est vraiment pas mal. Et lui aussi, ils sont assez doués autour de moi. Et là, c'est là où le jeu peut sortir. Et il disait même parfois, il y a des moments dans une scène où peut-être il va être en train de pleurer dans le personnage, mais il sent aussi qu'il y a un bout de lui-même de Kelsey qui sort aussi à travers cette émotion et ses larmes. Et c'est là où il dit qu'on peut trouver des choses un peu assez magiques, mais il faut avoir cette notion de confort d'abord. Matt, how about you? Anything in particular you learned on another show or that you remember from another show?
I think Kelsey said it really well. I'm always trying to remind myself about beginner's mind, because each show really is its own beast, and you can have methodology or techniques that you learn on how to do the best work you can in the medium with the speed at which it moves and preparation and things like that, but so much of it and what's going to make each show unique and hopefully create what people come back for happens between action and cut, when all the forces are there together and there's a chemistry happening, and the writing is how it comes out of the actors, and you know, like Kelsey said, that hopefully there's a magic that happens that makes it something people want to come back for the next week, but it can't be homogenized. It has to be specific to that beast.
Oui, Matt, il dit un peu revient sur ce qu'il a dit Kelsey. Pour lui, c'est pas quelque chose qu'on peut amener d'une expérience à une autre. Chaque expérience est unique. Et il faut vraiment là qu'entre action et coupé, c'est là qu'on retrouve qu'est-ce qui se passe pour cette scène en particulier ou pour cette série en particulier. Et il faut vraiment qu'on concentre là-dessus, y aller un peu table rasa, si vous voulez, avec la tête vierge, pour recommencer à nouveau en espérant qu'on trouvera cette magie encore que Kelsey disait tout à l'heure. Just one more thing to wrap up. This novel obviously doesn't have an end. It was written without an end, or actually the end never was written. What kind of freedom does that give you as a writer, or for all of the writers, to take this to another dimension? And do you feel a certain responsibility to Fitzgerald? Je disais en fait, le roman, bien sûr, sur lequel c'est inspiré, cette série n'était pas finie, c'est inachevé. Donc, est-ce que ça porte trop grand de challenge pour les auteurs, ou est-ce qu'en fait la barre est haute? Comment on fait face à ça quand on est scénariste?
I think our first responsibility is to our audience and to tell the story that works for them. We certainly do have a responsibility to Fitzgerald as well. No matter what happened, whether this had been a finished novel or not, we hope to do many years of a television series. We were going to expand beyond the boundaries that the novel set. The fact that it's not actually finished, and not only not finished, but that Fitzgerald left notes that suggest that he wasn't even sure what he was going to do, whether he was going to go back and rewrite the beginning, means I think we do feel somewhat freer to be inventive about things, but it was going to be inevitable anyway. In the long run, I hope that we're respectful of the ideas, the themes that Fitzgerald cared about, the way in which he thought about people, but we're not beholden to him. You know, we then are allowed to do things that he was not able to do. And by the way, the other thing that we're able to do is we're able to tell the story from the perspective of 2017. Which doesn't mean that our characters speak as if they understand what we understand, but that we know things Fitzgerald didn't know. You'll see some things, even in this first episode, that Fitzgerald could never have written about. There's a storyline about the Nazis' involvement in Hollywood. Well, he didn't know about that. That was secret. It was hidden. It was recent scholarship. We talk about that. We talk about the role of women and the way women come into their own in the same way that these men were doing. They were trying to find themselves. We talk about what's true for people of color in Hollywood. We talk about poverty in a way that Fitzgerald did not talk about because he was beyond the scope of the way somebody might have thought at that period of time. So we are truthful, I think, to 1936 and 1937 in a sense, but we have the perspective of 2017 as we do it. So it's actually sort of exciting in that way to use as a jumping off point this beautiful thing that is just like it's a platform that can send you to space.
Donc Chris dit en fait pour lui le roman est vraiment juste un tremplin vers autre chose, même si le roman a été achevé, ils auraient dû quand même le faire encore plus large, l'élargir, parce que ça c'est quand même très important. Et aussi il dit que vu d'aujourd'hui de 2017, ils ont un regard en fait sur ce monde de 1935-1936 que même Fitzgerald lui-même n'avait pas. Par exemple, il dit que vous allez voir, il parle des thèmes, par exemple les nazis et l'influence qu'ils avaient dans Hollywood, dont Fitzgerald n'était pas du tout au courant parce que c'était secret à l'époque, où il parle des droits des femmes, où il parle des gens de couleur, en fait, des choses dont Fitzgerald ne parlait pas beaucoup, la pauvreté, etc. Donc pour lui, il dit c'est ça qui est assez sympathique et excitant parce que du coup, il peut vraiment traiter le sujet en fait d'une manière beaucoup plus large parce qu'on regarde à travers nos yeux modernes.
Is there an interpreter, Emmy?
Oh, you're so
Because if so, I nominate you.
Thank you. Just like you thought. Does anybody, est-ce qu'il y a entre vous qui ont une question avant qu'on les laisse? Does anyone have a question for these guys before we let them go? Oui?
Je vais demander à Max ce qu'il préfère dans Monroe. Il aime le plus à propos de Monroe.
Okay, what do you like the most, Matt, about Monroe? Qu'est-ce que vous aimez le plus?
Well, I like that he's multifaceted. I think anytime you meet with someone about a project, you're aware that it could be 1 month or it could be 5-6 years. You want to make sure that it has legs, and he has so much dimension to his character. Not only is he somebody who's obsessed with legacy and who is willing to pursue the American dream at a great cost. And he's reinvented himself, become Monroe star from Milton Sternberg, as I mentioned before. And he's had to leave a lot of things behind. And some of my favorite scenes were like phone call conversations with his mother and seeing how disconnected they were because of who he'd chosen to become. He has this great tragic flaw in his romantic life that he is still living with the ghost of his dead wife and projecting her onto the people around him. And he has a heart condition that's put a ticking clock on his life that's made him obsessed with putting his stamp on this industry in the limited amount of time he has.
Moi, je l'adore parce qu'il y a tellement de nuances et tellement de côtés de son personnage. Souvent, quand on joue au personnage, on espère qu'on va pouvoir creuser pendant peut-être quelques mois, mais là, on peut y aller pendant des années avec Monroe. Il y a toute son histoire avec sa transition, avec le fait qu'il a un peu nié ses origines juives avec sa mère, il a changé son nom, il y a le fantôme de son ancienne femme qui est morte, comme il vit ça. Il y a toutes ces parties-là, en fait, de qui il devient, qu'on peut creuser encore plus et plus et plus, et moi, je trouve ça très sympathique à jouer. Anybody else? You know? Oui?
Ça n'a rien à voir, mais c'est pour Max. Do you do another season in American Horror Story?
Another season in American Horror Story.
Actually, my contract on this job precludes me from doing an entire season of American Horror Story. I don't know if that's too much information or not, but that's just the way it is. I will be doing a couple projects with Ryan Murphy in the next year, but neither one has been announced yet.
Voilà. Donc il ne peut pas, malheureusement pas, parce que dû à son contrat pour Last Tycoon, il ne peut plus continuer comme ça. Mais il a quand même signé d'autres projets avec Ryan Murphy, donc ça va venir, mais ce n'est pas encore annoncé. Yeah.
C'est tout le plaisir à tout le monde et à elle de se déplacer de l'Amérique et jusqu'ici. C'est un grand plaisir pour nous.
Thank you so much for coming over from America to be here with us.
Thank you for having us.
Moi aussi, j'aimerais qu'un jour vous faites ça aussi chez nous en Afrique. Moi, je suis congolaise de Kisangani. Je voulais que vous veniez faire ça, les mêmes films dans mon pays.
She's from the DRC. She says, please go to Africa.
She's from the Seychelles?
No, from the DRC.
DRC,
Yeah.
nice.
I said I want one day you come to my country to Zaire. I am Belgium, Congo. I want you come to make the same movie to my country.
Fantastic.
Yes,
Great.
nice to
Zaire,
meet you.
Zaire? Not
Yes.
Congo. I say. Okay.
Yes. Before was Lumumba.
Right.
Now is Kabila.
Yes.
I am from Kisangani.
Zaire,
I want you come one day to my country to Congo.
Okay.
We'd be
So I
honored.
didn't see it. Okay, maybe one more. Come on, it is about to.
Thank you very
Make
much.
a movie
Yes.
to my country.
Thank you
Story
so
from
much.
my country. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Merci.
Alors, juste ici. Yes.
Matt, you very kindly had an auction prize for going on set. For those of us who live in Monaco, it was a bit short notice to get over to LA, so my plea would be, A, could you do it again for the next season, and give us a bit more notice to get the bids up for your chosen charity.
Absolutely. That was something that kind of came through the channels with a little bit of late notice for me. So we were so thankful. I think we were the first Sony job that allowed where they allowed set visitors. So it was the first time they allowed an auction like that to happen. So if you let me come to Scotland, I'll do it earlier.
En fait, la question était sur une vente aux enchères pour aller visiter sur le tournage. Et donc, ce monsieur, il disait qu'en fait, il voulait avoir un peu plus il voulait savoir en avance pour pouvoir, en fait, essayer de tenter sa chance pour aller sur le tournage. OK. Merci beaucoup. I think with that, we'll say a big thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup à vous tous.